Hi, everyone. Good evening. Carl Steinbeck here. Want to talk tonight. This is Sunday, the 29th of June, and just want to get back to a case that's coming up in August. August 19th is when jury selection starts on the notorious Adelson, South Florida crime family that has been responsible for the murder of FSU law professor Dan Markel over 10 years ago. It's going on 11 years ago this coming month. So next month, in less than a month now, it'll be 11 years ago that the Honorable Professor Dan Markell was gunned down in his driveway by some hitmen that came up from South Florida that were hired by Adelsons of South Florida. And we already have one Adelson convicted. That is periodontist dentist type Charlie Adelson, who had some contacts with some bad folks, sought them out, and looked for a quick way to get his sister Wendy Adelson down to Florida because she was divorced from Dan Markell and they had two boys together. They're around the ages of 3 and 4. And the grandparents, Harvey and Donna Adelson, they thought that they deserved to have their grandkids in the Miami area. They were living or in the process of moving to South Beach area, near South Beach area there of Miami. And they thought, you know what, we need to have our grandkids down here. And if Dan Markell is going to be in the way, then by golly, we need to take care of that. So they came up with a plan to exterminate the professor, and lo and behold, there was more than one attempt over that year that they had sought this out to have their daughter transferred down there. So guess what? As soon as he was gunned down, everything that was pending in court between Wendy and Dan Markell to try to get the judge to allow her to have custody of the boys in Miami and the split custody up in Tallahassee would have been tossed out, and she would have had pretty much full custody down there in South Florida. Well, those kind of things don't ever work out that way because courts are very, very much against making sole custody type determinations, especially after they both agreed to share split custody. And then Wendy decided, based on her hatred of Tallahassee. In fact, she even wrote a book about how much she hated Tallahassee and despised her then husband. That she wrote a book about it a couple years ago before Dan Markell was murdered, and it symbolized a lot of the hatred she had for those as put forth with a different name. The names were changed. For example, her name was changed as well as Dan Markell's, but they had a lot of similar ties and connections with what she wrote about. So you could tell she was actually writing it about herself. And in any event, it's that book was even used in the last trial. I mentioned the last trial as forecasting her hatred of Tallahassee and also Dan Markell, and that was shown to the jury as a motivating factor in a forecasting, like I say, of what was to come, the murder of Dan Markell. So I expect them to use that again in this case. The defense has done a motion to exclude that book from being referenced at all. The defense have done a whole lot in this case. These recent defense counsels, because the previous defense counsel who represented Charlie Adelson, that was Dan Roshbaum. He was from South Florida area, Miami area, and he went from representing Donna as a suspect to Charlie as a charged, indicted first-degree murder defendant, and then after Charlie was convicted of first-degree murder and the associated charges, including conspiracy to commit murder, then he right away switched back to Donna, and so there was a conflict of interest issue there was brewing long before this Charlie was ever arrested, because he had been representing Donna, like I say, as a suspect since 2016. So if Donna would never been arrested and charged, that conflict of interest would never been resurrected, or risen out of the dormancy stage there. But once they had Charlie arrested, then it's like, oh my gosh, this is like really bizarre. So I've been covering the case. I've only been talking about it from a pro justice standpoint. Even though I'm currently a defense counsel, I'm speaking on justice matters because I've been a prosecutor and defense attorney in numerous times, rotating between the two depending on where I was stationed in the military. I've also been doing it in private practice, as well as I've been a assistant criminal district attorney. And so I've been looking at this in terms of like what needs to be done because it was really an outrage that more Adelsons had not been prosecuted when I started covering this case 2.5 years ago with my brother, the executive producer here, John. And so John's the one that got me hooked on this. And so it's I'm going back to this now. I also want to cover the Kohlberger case. So let's talk to John about that today. So he's going to go to. We're debating on where he should go, and we decided that Miami, not Miami, but Tallahassee would be the best place to cover of these two cases. And I'll try to cover both of these at the same time because there will be some overlap. The Kohlberger case starts at 18, so I want to do some like recaps of both these trials during the evening period. And not sure if I'm going to do a live stream at Donna's trial. There's so much repeat from what we had last year with, I should say, almost 2 years ago with Charlie Adelson's case that I don't want to have the same repeat coverage so much this time. But maybe I'll jump in if I do day coverage of it as well. That's live streaming of the actual trial and hearing. I'll do it over key witnesses, ones that are sort of redundant. With Charlie's, I may not do that, but some that are definitely important, like Wendy Adelson, the sister of Charlie and the daughter of Donna Adelson. She's going to be called as a witness again, and she's a named unindicted co-conspirator. So the folks that have been following this case, I think a lot of people, most people that really know the details of this case, are outraged that she's not been prosecuted yet. And this district attorney's officer, which is known as a state attorney's office there in Florida, they've been really dragging their feet on this case. It should never have been taking this long. And so the delays of the case, along with the lack of justice for the surviving sons of Dan Markel, which have been denied, for most intents and purposes, all meaningful contacts with the parents of Dan Markel. They're both Canadians, and there's an extended family tree up in Canada, and they've pretty much been shut out of the grandparents' lives. The boys have never been alone with either grandparent or their aunt, Dan's sister Shelley, and her kids. So they have to go to Florida to visit, but they're always helicopter supervised by Wendy. And at the time it was also Donna. But Donna's been, if you stop thinking about it, Donna's been locked up there in custody in Tallahassee, the infamous Leon County jails, for like 20 months now. And the very thing that they could have done is it's like, if your daughter can't leave Tallahassee, then why don't you go visit your daughter? She was a part-time office manager at the Adelson Dental Institute, where her husband Harvey was close to retiring, and he wasn't having an issue with money. They had plenty of money. The last trial with Charlie, that looked like they had over $8.5 million collectively, and so they had plenty of money just to fly up to Tallahassee whenever Wendy had custody, or they got tired of driving up there. It's like over a 7-hour drive from South Florida, Miami area to Tallahassee. So they wound up deciding to do the most stupid deal possible, which is decide to murder Professor Markel so that they could have exclusive custody. And it worked. It's worked this whole time for the most part. But what they don't realize is that the very thing that they're doing, such as changing the boys' last names, so they stripped the boys' last name. Their dad gets murdered, and right away Wendy's looking to change the boy's name, all under the guise of safety for the boys and all that. But like they wouldn't know where to find the boys because they're living with their mother, Wendy Adelson, right? So what are they going to do? Be going around to schools asking to meet the boys so they can gun them down in a school if there's any kind of threat there? No, they know where to find their mom. So changing the boy's last name was nothing but a unending campaign to basically exterminate any semblance of a Markel from the boy's life. That's how much hatred there was for this case. So based on that hatred and the injustice done to the boys, that's why my brother got me talked into this case. So anyway, it's been a long saga here. There's more that has to continue, but anyway, at least I was able to meet my wife through this. So in a way, if these delays and injustice to the kids wouldn't have happened, I would have met my wife. So that's the personal benefit to me here. So but I still want to cover it here because it is nonetheless an outrage that these boys, I think they're 14 and 15 now, And so they're going to be in high school before they ever see more convictions, perhaps, and maybe graduate from high school before they actually see more arrests and prosecutions for what was pretty much a family South Florida affair of deciding to target and have Professor Markell gunned down, like I said. So the uh, the very thing, though, is that is so amazing is that the very reason that Dan Markell was murdered was so that all the Florida Adelsons could hang out together in South Florida, right? But now look what's happened. The very whole goal of this murder plot was to get everything away from the Tallahassee connection, get away from the Dan Markell connection, and now think about it. Who's in Miami right now? The only one that's left in Miami is 80-year-old Harvey Adelson, the grandfather. And so Wendy is left. She left for Austin area, Texas now, and she's got the two boys with her there. So Harvey's wife, Donna, she's pending trial, as I said, in August for first-degree murder, the same charge that her son, and there's overwhelming evidence against her. I've been saying that she should have been tried in a minimum with Charlie Adelson because they're so tight at the hip on this case. So many of the same witnesses and the testimony is overlapping. Well, you'll see in this upcoming trial. So I've been frustrated with the prosecution dragging their feet. They're not the most aggressive. And you have to attribute that to ultimately the chief prosecutor there, the state attorney, Jack Campbell. So when they've done good, I've praised them. When they've not done good, I've just, like I say, I call a spade. And so that's what you're going to get from me on this coverage. I do want them to succeed. I do not want the defense to succeed. So I'm not doing anything to help them or give them clues. And so everything's filtered that way. And it doesn't really matter anyway what kind of defense they come up with if I do tell them what I think they're going to argue, because in the end, it's not going to matter. The most bizarre defense you could ever hear was propped up for Charlie Adelson. It was really laughable. It's the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard in any kind of trial setting, especially a murder case that's got worldwide coverage. And so Donna's going to have to do a somewhat of a repeat of that, and she may try to distance herself, but it doesn't matter. They got her on the after a bump where the FBI came up to her and gave her a newspaper article talking about Dan Markell being killed, and one of the other hitmen wanted more money. They weren't even aware there was a second hitman that went up there with the Sigfredo Garcia, who was the actual trigger puller. And so they really threw him for a loop. They didn't know what to do. And of course they got they had a flurry of meetings and calls and messages, and their phones were wiretapped. So they weren't smart enough to figure out that the FBI could be on them. They were making comments as if this could be some kind of a bump type operation, but Charlie just couldn't keep his mouth shut. And so there's a lot of incriminating things we heard on a wiretap between Charlie and his mom, Donna, who are admitted after into evidence during Charlie's trial. Now those will be admitted into evidence against Donna. So defense is doing everything they can to block the truth from coming in. That's typical what you see from the defense, because that's very damaging information against Donna Adelson. It was the same kind of information that convicted her son. So they're even throwing up more roadblocks to try to get the judge to keep out evidence. They've even tried to get the judge to be removed because there's been more search warrants done against Donna and Harvey since Charlie was convicted. And that's not going to be something that is going to be appealable and winnable on any kind of appellate court level review there in Florida, because the judge is just doing ex parte, meaning the other side wasn't there. Donna's attorneys were not there, and he's authoring search warrants based on probable cause. So I think that what's going to happen is I saw something about a troll here. So okay. Thank you for that alert. Just zapped that person trying to steer the conversation. And anyway, like I say, I'm going to cover it from the standpoint that this is pretty much something that I feel frustrated with, because Donna, like I say, should have been already charged and convicted a long time ago. So should have Wendy, as well as Harvey. So if you want to go back and look at any of my videos, those of you that are new, a lot of you might be covering this new for the first time. So if you want to go back and look at any other videos, just maybe look for Harvey Adelson, and also look at Wendy. So there's stuff we talk about with Wendy, and all the indicators of her involvement. So in any event, the thing is, it's with this trial coming up, it's going to be basically a Charlie 2.0 trial, but there's some new twists and new fangles with the evidence that they've come forth. We've seen recently that there is some wiretap evidence with Harvey Adelson, apparently, and Donna was talking to Harvey about having their eldest son, the honorable doctor up in the Northeast, who is who is nothing like the other Florida Adelsons. He actually is listed as a witness against his mom, and I do think they should call him, and I think they will call him, especially now there's been a hit put on in his life, from what we're hearing from sources down there in the Tallahassee courtroom. So I think this case is really going to have some new twists and turns, and I think all these kind of things are just going to try to come crashing down on Donna, and she's not going to be able to avoid this crush on her head. And they're going to try to come up with some reasons that Katie McBanois, who was a middle person, Charlie's so-called girlfriend that he used to find a hitman to have Dan Markell killed, she turned state's evidence in Charlie's trial after being denying sweetheart deals to just basically tell the truth and get out of jail right then and there. But despite being a mom of 2 kids, she refused to cut a deal. And when she went to trial, she professed her innocence, which is really insane. And then out of the hung jury the first time, she was tried again and easily convicted. So she's starting to see the light now. She was helpful in Charlie's trial to convict him, but she is facing life without parole, and the only way she can maybe get that reduced is if she does continue to cooperate and bringing down more Adelsons. Excuse me. Thank you for Food is Love, my mod tonight. Appreciate you. And those of you new and covering this channel, you can you can see that I try to keep this a clean channel, so no cussing, swearing, and just want to have a lawyer courtroom type conversation about stuff. So I'm not here to beat up on people, call them names, but and so this is not anything but like attorney level conversation you have if you're working in a courthouse and attorneys are in the prosecution office talking about what they need to try the case and how the case is looking, all that kind of stuff. So in any event, Beach Mom, you're saying her attorneys are going way over their heads. So Donna's attorney, so keep in mind this Daniel Rashbaum was talking about. So he got conflicted out, and I was saying he was conflicted from representing Donna. The judge sort of did just a perfunctory 7-question Q&A, question and answer with Donna Adelson. She didn't have to explain if she understood how she's waiving a conflict with her the lawyer representing her after representing Charlie. And so anyway, it was just a hot mess. I just was saying that this is going to come back to bite him, and sure enough, it did, because the day Donna was supposed to go to trial last fall, Rashbaum found out that through appellate counsel of Charlie Adelson that he did not concur with the dual representation of his mom now after representing him and losing with him. So basically Donna could have already been gone to trial and been out if she was acquitted last fall. But as it turns out, the lawyer had to withdraw the day the trial was supposed to start up with jury selection. So she had to go out there and spend some month plus looking for a new lawyer, and she wound up finding 2 different lawyers. They're from that local area, though, not a South Florida attorney anymore. So she's got a Jackie Fulford, that's the former judge in that area, and she sort of got forced out of office for some stuff. I won't get into that. But the other one is a Josh Zellman. So, and looking at Josh Zellman, there was a recent motion hearing. It was about 2 hours and 48 minutes long, regarding change of venue. So Zellman, he was arguing that this case has so much publicity there that Donna's not going to get a fair trial. But the standard is really high in Florida. It's not whether a juror has heard about the case, it's whether they have an inflexible attitude as to the guilt of the defendant. So that's they're going to be able to sit a jury easily, but the judge hasn't ruled on that yet. He's going to wait till actually have a jury seated there, and they and to see if everybody comes in and says, "Yep, Donna's guilty. My mind's made up. I know enough about this case." If they can't find 12 jurors plus a handful of alternates, then yeah, maybe they could have a change of venue at that point. But in any event, it's going to be something I predict will be a jury easily seated. This is a very transient community. It's a college town. There's several universities in that town. It's a state capital. And so they'll find people that have heard about it. They'll probably have a third of the people that don't even know anything about it, or if they heard the Dan Markel name, they can't attribute it to anything. And so I don't think it's going to be a big deal at all. But they're actually working and hustling the case more to represent Donna than I saw Rashmam ever do. Rashmam hardly did any depositions, so there's more depositions that these attorneys want to do now. And so let me show you this here. This is a no, that's the wrong one. Here we go. So this one here, these are the folks that are going to be called to testify. They're listed on those state's witness list, and they will be called, just like they did in the last trial for Donna's son Charlie. So they're going to have depositions here. So they're already going to trial in August, and they're doing these depositions in the last flurry here, which is pretty interesting that they're trying to do depositions this close to trial. So I think they realize they are sort of behind the eight ball. There's a recent discovery where they were data dumped like 100,000 emails and text messages. So these attorneys are sort of, I think, having a hard time digesting all this information, and they don't really know what they're going to put for a cogent, credible defense because there is none. And so I think they're just trying to do as much as they can to show that they're working on behalf of Donna rather than just sitting back collecting the big paychecks or paycheck. I think it would have been a flat fee that they each would have charged Donna. Maybe they each are getting $750,000 to defend her. But Jason Newland, he's like the senior investigator there at the state attorney's office. And I'll give you a rundown of what these different witnesses have said in the past, how they're relevant on this case. If you stand by a second here. So he had testified earlier about plea negotiations in 2016 that led to a deal with Luis Rivera. Luis Rivera, he was the one that was added on by Sigfredo Garcia to be driving up there to help find Professor Markel to take part in the murder. And he's also a gang member there of Latin Kings there in South Florida before he got picked up by the feds. And then ultimately he agreed to turn state's evidence and cut a deal. He's going to be serving only 6 more years for his involvement in the murder of Dan Markel. And he also gave up Meg Banwa as an accomplice, and he also showed him where the gun was thrown, or where he thought he remembered the gun was thrown into some body of water on their way back to Miami from after shooting Dan Markel. And then we also have Chris Corbett, Sergeant Corbett. He's a phenomenal witness. He does all the cell phone records, analysis, and testimony. He's testified over 100 times in previous trials. He talks about all the cell phone data and all the information that you can get from cell phones that really was able to show and track how the two hitmen, Garcia and Rivera, traveled from Miami to Tallahassee and back, and all the flurry of phone calls in between that trip up there. And the calls were between those two as well as Katie McBanwell, including Charlie Adelson, previous doctor, dentist Charlie Adelson, on the day of the murder, and also the day after when the three met up, the two hitmen and Katie McBanwell met to receive the $100,000 that they received from the hit and the 100,000 came in stacks of stapled $100 bills. And then we also have Mary Hull. She testified also against Charlie Adelson. She was a financial investigator, and she was able to talk about how they had all this money. They had over $8 million. She was able to talk about records from the dental office there. She described the Adelson Institute records showing McBanois had a total receipt of 44 checks, mostly in $400 increments, starting nearly 2 months the day of the murder. And there was no timesheets or W-2s showing that Katie had actually even ever worked there. And so that's checks that Donna had written out. So she's a very key witness against Donna. And she also testified about the cars and the motorcycles the hitman bought after the murder, including a $1,000 flight to the Dominican Republic that Charlie Adelson bought for Katie McBanois in March of 2015. Then we also have FBI Special Agent Patrick Sanford. He worked closely with Detective Isom of the Florida Tallahassee Police Department there to try to solve this case. We didn't see Detective Isom testify the last time. I'm not sure he's going to testify now. He's retired. He's getting up there in age. But Sanford was present during the proffers that Rivera had made, along with twice as investigators tried to trace the killer's steps and their drive to the place where the gun had been tossed. An FBI dive team actually searched the area near Tampa, but they never did find the weapon. They also surveilled McBanois' home, and Sanford also helped set up this bump operation that was a phenomenal success. That's something you all need to see if you're new to the case. Look up the bump on the Adelson murder case. If you just type that into YouTube, you'll see that. And you'll see the way they approached Donna, and it led to a frantic conversation and gathering between the responsible parties for the murder of Dan Markel. And they're also going to do a deposition for Sherry Bennett. She's a Tallahassee Police Department investigator, and she helped interview witnesses of the case. And I think they want to interview her because she had information. She interviewed a relative of Katie Banois, and the police suspected might have helped her pay the legal bills. And she had been arrested for embezzlement, so maybe some of those embezzled dollars were used to pay for Katie's attorneys. So in any event, that's sort of what we see here for these upcoming depositions. It's really late in the game on a murder case to be having this many depositions of these key witnesses. So I think they got their work cut out for them, and I do think they're a little bit overwhelmed, and they don't seem to have a lot of energy. When I hear them talk in court, it's really low energy. So I think Donna's maybe not too happy with them, is my guess. Don, you're asking, do I think the trial will start in August? I do, but I've always said, I think Donna could have some kind of health problem. I thought that there's a chance she may not make a trial. She's held up better than I thought she would in the jail, but when you stop thinking about it, she's had to go to solitary confinement. I've been saying that there's going to be threats of violence and actual violence, perhaps, against the Adelsons when they go to prison because they got all this money. The inmates are going to know about it. And what did we hear from Donna when she was begging the judge to let her out on pretrial release? Is that she's getting threatened and shoved up against the wall, and she's getting shaken down, just like Charlie. There's folks shaking down Charlie. That's why they had to get him out of Florida. That's why he's up in prisoner swap and up there in the state of South Dakota. But South Dakota's had violence there too. So I don't know if that was anything about Charlie Adelson, people fighting over how they're going to get his money. But if you have a lot of money and you're a dentist and you're in prison, trust me, you're going to have a lot of people knowing about you, and a lot of people are going to be doing stuff to try to extort money out of you. Yeah, nap connoisseur. Yeah, she said she was assaulted in the shower. So, I mean, she'd be totally paranoid if there's other inmates there and she can't even take a shower and has to look over her shoulder. And she's 75 years old, going on 76. She'll be 76 in February. And she's really declined health wise and how she looks. And you can just tell this is really wearing her down. And so Yeah, with those riots there in South Dakota prison, we're not they don't really give out information like they do in Florida, so we're not finding out those kind of details that would be nice to see if we were in Florida. So they're keeping a tight lid on it. That's part of their state law in South Dakota. But Charlie's think about it. He's up there in South Dakota, and Harvey, he's 80 years old. How's he go up to see him? It's a long, long flight to go across the country like that, and so just to see your son during visiting hours at at a state prison there, it's not going to be easy to get through that. So think about it. So Harvey is 80, going to 81, and his wife's in Leon County jail for the last 20 months. His son has been in um, for almost a year and a half on, I should say more than a year and a half, on first degree murder charges. So you got two of your four immediate family members that are in jail or prison. And then you got Wendy. She flew the coop on you, and she left from Miami all the way to go to Austin, Texas. So you really don't see your grandkids probably much anymore either. So the whole thing has just crumbled before them. It's a really, really disastrous plan. I remember when I was starting to follow this channel, I was like shocked when I heard that someone said this is like a really well planned murder, a content creator. Like, this is really a bad, horribly planned murder. Is this a matter of you got prosecution team that's slow of foot and not very aggressive. So the prosecution has done this one at a time approach. We're going to wait till one Adelson is prosecuted before we do the next. And I've been saying they should charge them all at the same time or do a quick succession, charge them all within a few months of each other and make them all turn on each other for the best deal. So, yeah, Dog Mom, Latin Kings are big in Florida. He's safer elsewhere. Well, not necessarily. You know why? Because they have Latin Kings also there in South Dakota. So he's not safe wherever he goes. And I wonder if he's in solitary like Donna. So Donna's in solitary confinement because she can't handle the threats and the assaults on her. Little misread. Do we know any thoughts from the eldest son not involved? Has he made any comments? There was some comment he made, I think, on Wondery back in the very beginning. He talked about the case and he talked about how his mom was very much against. I think he actually said that his mom was very much against who he was dating at the time and helped force a breakup. And I forget a lot of those details right now off the top of my head, but it was you're not going to find a whole lot on it out there, but he would, I believe, be very credible and have very much insightful information about how his mom acted when Dan Markel was murdered. They don't want to bring up the name Dan Markel, and he's pretty much estranged from the family as well because of that. He was sort of the odd man out because they never approved of him marrying a non-Jewish lady, and but he's doing very well for himself and his family. Great guy, and he has nothing. He's nothing like these other family members that he has in South Florida. Tony Bravo, Donna is a bad actor. What do you make of this family illusion of great acting skills they seem to share? Well, Donna thought that Wendy could play it up and do all kinds of acting and fool Dan into and manipulate Dan basically into giving up the custody there in Tallahassee. But Donna guessed wrong, and she's very much losing. She was losing her mind back then. So imagine how she is now, being in this jail in solitary confinement. She's probably going to do something that's going to be very much to her detriment in court. I don't think she can control her behavior. We've seen her get carried away in pretrial hearings. So yes, I do think Charlie's brother will testify. His name's Rob Adelson, Dr. Rob Adelson. Mrs. K, you're in my camp here, so that's nice to see. You firmly believe they should all arrest them all at once. I don't agree with Georgia going this at one at a time. 11 years of children have lived with these evil people who took their dad. Yeah, Karen Roman, Aryan gangs. Yeah, Aryan Nation. There's like the white supremacist type people that are in the mountainous regions of the United States mostly, and but they're in prisons, and so those are folks that would definitely hate folks of Jewish descent like Charlie Adelson. So that's another threat he's got to look out for. Not only Latin Kings, but a Aryan Nation. Oh, here it is, Miss K. Rob spoke on the podcast "Over My Dead Body," very telling interview. So yeah, that's been such a long time since I've listened to that. So I recommend you guys check that out. I think it's still out there. Yeah, Tony Bravo, you're saying that there is a theory that prosecution needs to not arrest Wendy in order to let her talk on the stand and gather more evidence. What do you think about that? I've been saying that you don't need her to testify to get a conviction, but even if they wanted to, they could still have her arrested and indicted and in confinement as well as her mom, and to still order her to testify. She may be less inclined to want to testify, but if she didn't testify, then so be it. But every time Donna, excuse me, Wendy Adelson has testified, somebody's gotten convicted. So her mom's going to be next. She helped convict her brother, and he's fuming mad about it, as we saw in his post conviction rants to his mom, talking about how could what are the odds that Wendy would drive by the scene of the murder like a little over an hour after it happened? Fierce like Frida. Yeah, I think Donna will testify to get her theory across, and she's going to try to be sympathetic, but she's not going to come across as sympathetic. I've never seen a, I've seen a group of people have so much hatred towards somebody that is unbelievable. She won't be able to conceal her hatred of Dan Markel, and that's going to be to her detriment in front of a jury. Even if she doesn't testify, the jury can pick up on that. Beach Bum, you hope Wendy gets arrested right after she testifies, walking down the sidewalk. It'd be nice if she got arrested right after she got off the witness stand. Was walking out of the courtroom, out of the courthouse, and they just arrested her right then and there. But I don't know. This Jack Campbell, he's pretty weak. And for example, after Rashbaum had to withdraw his counsel because Charlie's counsel said he wasn't going to consent to the dual representation of a conflicted attorney, and Jack Campbell gave a public press release saying that, well, hey, we can't do anything about who people choose as their lawyers, and if it comes up as conflict, it's sort of like one of those deals that this happens, and we can't intervene on who people select as their attorneys. But what I was saying is like, yeah, there's actually Supreme Court case law that allows you to do that to prevent the whole case from going sideways on appeal. So prosecutors do have a vested interest, and normally the Sixth Amendment right to choose your counsel is not going to be interfered with. But if you have a conflicted attorney representing you, then the state has a vested interest in that, and they can get your attorney booted off the case. And that's what should have happened. In fact, the case I cited right after that, Judge Everett used that same case law, Supreme Court case law, where it was showing that it is authorized to bounce a conflicted attorney off of a case. So anyway, it's just really shocking to see that the prosecution office didn't understand federal Supreme Court case law that authorized them to get rid of that conflicted counsel Rashbaum, and they knew they intended to prosecute Donna as well. So he'd have been prosecuted in Charlie's case. He also would have been conflicted in Donna. So both of these cases would have been overturned on appeal. So I've been saying I think that Charlie's case is should get overturned on appeal based on Rashomond's representation because it's the conflict was not adequately explained and not adequately covered. And there is an argument that can be made that he wasn't working as hard to represent Charlie, because he was mainly focused on Donna instead. And so if you have two co-defendants on a murder case, who do you represent more than the other? Are they all equal? If they're all equal, that's pretty hard to do. And that's why the Sixth Amendment right to conflict-free counsel, I think, was impinged on. But it wasn't really touched at all in their appeal brief. It was reserved, this conflict of counsel thing. So I think it's something that's going to come back later down the road. But Charlie's going to spend a number of years still in prison before we find out what the appellate courts do. Wandy, I don't think I'll be going to the trial there. Last year, I just showed up to closing arguments for Charlie's, or a year before, I should say. And I'm not sure if I'll do that for Donna's. If Leslie and I will do that. I know John's going to be covering pretty much the whole case there. So we'll do some nightly recaps from what John's picking up in the courtroom there. Also, he's going to be there for jury selection. Barb P. There was some information. I didn't have any real good details, but there was some reference in court that there was a hit put out on Dr. Rob Adelson. So Donna and apparently Harvey were talking about having Robert killed, so he wasn't testifying against his mom. I don't know any of the details of that, but that's what was alluded to. Tony Bravo again, you're asking, do I refrain from evaluating mental condition of Adelson's, judging from Donna's notes? Yeah, I'm not going to talk about their mental issues. I will say that the constant popping of benzodiazepines, such as Xanax, by the Adelsons can be a issue that affects our mental thinking, and it can be the thing that instigates violence. So if you're popping benzos like they are, then you're also drinking alcohol and taking other drugs and stuff like that, prescription steroids and all that. It can be a recipe for making you violent, but they're not going to bring that out on any defense. Yeah, trial starts on the 19th of August. That's a Tuesday. And they should have openings statements by Monday, if not Friday. Don, you're asking if I've seen or where the contents of the stack of emails the defense has whined about delaying everything. No, but I assume it has to do with things involving Harvey Adelson. So you might see Harvey Adelson arrested this year as well as Wendy. That I think they need to stop dragging their feet on this. Quit being so timid on crime. Patriotic. Florida seems to have a weak state attorney problem. Well, they definitely do in Tallahassee. Eric Norgard, you're asking, do I think the original plan was for Wendy to find Dan Markell? When the police were there, she had to redirect ABC Liquor as a reason she's driving that area. Some people have said that, and maybe it was her in her mind what to do, but I don't think that was ever passed on to Charlie because Charlie was really bothered by it, by her driving by there because he was making it sound like, by her doing that, it makes me look guilty. It makes um, that had something to do with his conviction. It's like, why would she go there if she knew about it? Then he knows about it. So guilt by association of a family member. So that's why he was so mad about it. So it might be Wendy's idea, but it was never passed around as an original plan, I think, for that the others blessed off on. Now, if you're saying there's too many coincidences on the day of the murder for Wendy not to be involved from day one. Sarasota, you're saying you always thought Charlie would make friends easier. He was always bragging that he could hang with criminals and professionals alike. Yeah, that's true if you're out on the street, but once you go to prison, I would say, Sarah, that is knowing that you come from a dentist family and you got a lot of money, that's a game changer. You're not going to be looked at in the same light as somebody that's just a normal guy off the street that got wrapped up in some crime of violence. You're convicted of murder and you've been a doctor, a dentist type, periodontist. Yeah, can you imagine if Wendy's arrested this year and also Harvey? Wow. Both of them up in Leon County Jail waiting trial. If that doesn't happen, I can't tell you how that badly that reflects on the state attorney's office there. Miriam Sambrand, you're saying Donna's not in control of her life anymore, so she's falling apart. Well, health wise, eating that nasty food, and then all that money you're spending on attorneys. The attorneys don't seem that fired up. They know that she's going down. There's nothing they can do to keep her from getting convicted like Charlie. Hey, how you doing, Harley? You've been following the channel for a long time. You've had a lot of comments that I've commented on, and let's see. Yeah, and definitely Wendy has new evidence stacked against her from what you're hearing through grapevine. I'm hearing that too. I don't know what exact specifics, but maybe some of that massive data dump has her in some conversations as well. I think she's been very careful not to be caught up in saying things incriminating, but we'll see. But even if they don't have anything incriminating on her in any of that last data dump, they'd have enough and have had enough for years to pursue charges on her. Beach bum, you want a fair trial? She needs competent counsel. Yeah, I don't want anybody to have incompetent counsel and get convicted that way. Even if it doesn't get reversed on appeal, it's not in our justice system to have somebody go down just because their attorney was that inept. So I hope they do a good job for her. Like I said, I think that they have their work cut out for them, and it's not gonna matter who she has as her lawyer. She's going down. Kathy, that's right. They ruined their whole family doing this stupid crime. Now they're gonna spend their lives in prison. Incredibly stupid. Just well, how sad to think that you can look your grandkids in the eye and you could have stopped this whole thing from going down. You actually planned it. Yeah, Danielle, you're saying that the drive makes 0 sense. So Danielle's talking about how Wendy, the day of the murder, drove way out of the way, like 40 minutes out of the way to go to a liquor store, a so-called liquor store run when all these other liquor stores were closer. And she happens to just drive by the house she used to live in with Dan Markel and then sees all these cop cars and crime scene vehicles in front of Dan's house and crime scene tape and all that. And she just right away leaves with no questions asked. And that's where her kids spent the night before, and went to school that morning, but never did anything to inquire. So that's highly, highly probative, extremely suspicious behavior, shows a consciousness of guilt. Thanks, John Smith. Appears like Rita, that's what exactly what they could have done. Just they had millions in the bank, 8.5 or more million. They could easily rented something up in Tallahassee and gone up there frequently. But no, they want it's like she wanted to take over. Donna wanted to take over raising the boys. And it's like she was like obsessed with those grandsons of hers. And now look at it. Now they don't even get to see her. They can't see her for the last 20 months while she's been locked up. They don't let minors in there. Jennifer Rank, you're saying that the prescription drug issue is an interesting point. Perhaps this explains why an educated, wealthy family who has it all would choose murder over having a second home in Tallahassee. So foolish. Yeah, I really think that a real, a real underlying recurring theme in so many cases is not just the alcohol that we hear about, like in the Karen Reed case, but it's also prescription meds, especially mind altering ones. All these benzos, side effects can be self harm. Self harm includes suicide. If it includes suicide, guess what? You could also decide to kill somebody else. So you can become somebody you have no resemblance to if you're on these things long term. I've seen it happen over and over again. Cindy Petrikowski is Donna's lawyer chewing tobacco spit in a cup. Do you see her in the paddy wagon video? Yeah, I did see her. That was wow. Do you think she came from like a $1.7 million high rise condo in South Beach to back to that paddy wagon? Wow. Yeah, they never thought they would get caught. They weren't they weren't experts at committing planning out crimes, especially crimes of murder. So they thought they could outsmart the stupid cops, and they really have. They got away with it for a number of years, and Harvey's still on the loose as well as Wendy. So, in a normal state attorney's office, there's no way all these Adelsons have been walked around all these years. No way. Yeah, there's so much mental health issues that are out there in the criminal law, and I think most defense attorneys don't understand it. I'm not talking about mental health issues, as a general rule on criminal cases, because if I'm taking it from the pro prosecution standpoint, pro justice standpoint, prosecutors never bring up the mental status of a defendant unless they're trying to rebut something the defense is trying to say on some kind of mitigation or if it's an insanity defense. But so that's why I'm not, like I say, I'm not going to get into that here. But I do think, that's something to be noted, that we heard a lot of testimony about how Charlie's always talking about popping Xanax and telling others to do so. We don't know much Xanax they're using, but you use benzos on a frequent basis over a number of years, you can really get your mind messed up, and you can become violent doing that. But you're never going to see that in a court of law as a defense for them. Yeah, Danielle X, you're talking about Wendy here. Trescott's the name of the street that she went down that Dan Markel lived on there. He was killed on. So she took that out of the way place. And then when she wanted to see if there was crime scene tape or a law enforcement officer there. And sure enough, she found it. All right, Danielle, you're saying you wouldn't call Campbell, the DA. He's actually state attorney office chief. Soft on crime? Well, I would say he's not tough on this case. I'll tell you that. He might be tough on other cases, but I don't know. I don't know why. Why is he so hesitant to go forward on these other Adelsons? Cats are doing good. Our cats are all well. Thank you. Crypto Catherine, yeah, it must be shocking going from a life of privilege and having agency over one's life to now being in prison. It's a real shocker. But they thought they could get away with it with all the digital tracking and cameras and all that. To think that you could have your hitman go up there and never get traced back down to Miami and never traced back to you. Yeah, so if you talk about something about a personality disorder, I will not comment on that. So no, they do not let inmates handle sharp instruments like you would have in a dental office. You could easily injure another inmate, or it could be taken from Charlie and used against him or other inmates or other guards. So that's absolutely not ever going to be allowed. Plus, he's not a dentist anymore. He was stripped of his license. So, plus, what are they going to give him drugs to sedate people and stuff like that? So there's just no way that's happening. Bless Mama 3, you believe Wendy went to Texas when she's arrested. Ruth's law that passed won't matter since it's only in Florida. So yeah, Ruth Markel, it's called the Markel Act. So Florida passed a law a number of years ago based on this case because of the outrage that the Markel boys were denied so much visitation of their grandparents and in Canada, that they passed this law that in event there's one spouse is accused of murdering the other spouse, that the grandparents of the victim they automatically have some visitation rights because, like I said, they've been, for all intents and purposes, for the most part, not totally, but for the most part, have had very limited meaningful contact and connection with the boys. The boys had never been to Canada, for example, since Stan's death. They'd never seen their dad's grave site in Canada. They've been stripped of their dad's last name. Yeah, David Ridgway. There was Charlie wanted to sound like a gangster on one hand and be like a rich periodontalist on the other, and those two things collided. And he's really paying the price now. Yeah, Knapp, you're saying Wendy was very anxious leading up to first attempt and second time. Jeff, you're talking about Jeff Lacoste, her then boyfriend, testified to that. She's very anxious. That's true. He testified to all that. Jeff Lacoste, he's a PhD professor there at FSU. So obvious that Wendy was using him to take part in either being a co-actor or being the fall guy to take the blame. Yeah, Donna's not going to come across well in court. I can just tell you that right now. Her body language is not going to go over well. Jurors read body languages all the time, and I'm telling you, she is not going to come across well. She's not going to be liked by the jury. And if she gets on the stand, it's going to get even worse for her. So, and I'm telling you, when you have defense counsel, they know their client's guilty. They like them taking the stand to explain their story because it helps deflect a lot of the post-trial finger pointing that the defense gives towards them, saying, "See, you should have called me as a witness. I could have explained everything. I'd have been found not guilty if you would have advised me to take the stand." So if they know it's a sinking ship, if the client wants to testify, they'll eagerly say, "Yeah, go ahead, take the stand. Yeah, we'll get you all prepped up for that." And they're going to act like they believe her. And meanwhile, they'll see for what it is that she's nailed dead to right. Teresa, Nick, I've seen this a number of times. It comes up frequently, and I'm sort of shocked to see this. Whereas you're saying, do you think they could be waiting until kids are over 18 to arrest Wendy? So think about it. So if that got out there, if that was a public perception that you could, if you didn't like your ex-spouse and you wanted full custody of your kids, just go ahead and murder your ex-spouse because you'll get custody of the kids at least till 18, and then by then, who knows? You'll have different prosecutors, different DAs, and all that, and you may get away with it. So that would send the wrong message, and there was no way that would be a reason why. There's a lot of cases where someone's prosecuted and the kids wind up their mom's dead and their dad's being prosecuted. You know, that's like the Morphew case, among others. I think really, will Katie, you're talking about Katie McBanois testify at Donna's trial? Yeah, I think she will. I think she'll say the same kind of critical details about what it was like when they were waiting. what she was saying to Charlie and about Donna and Harvey coming by and about the moldy money that she got paid with the $100,000. Yeah, I'm looking at the Morphew case. I'm waiting to hear from my cousin who knows somehow familiar with some of the Morphew. I don't remember the details, but she told me about that over a year ago. I just can't remember the details, so I'm trying to get a hold of her. And Sir Tedrick Walker, it does sound like the Morphew case seems like a slam dunk, especially with Bam uh, found in Suzanne's bones. Yeah, Bam is like the wild game tranquilizer. They found that in her bones, so and he had access to that. Yeah, I think it's like an open and shut case. It's like the Murdo case to me. As a matter of fact, you said he looked back at Charlie at Georgia cross-examining Charlie, and he really came across as a smart aleck. Yeah, I mean he was a total slickster there, and people were worried that Georgia failed to pin him down on stuff, and he was able to weasel out everything. But he just came across like such a shyster that I wasn't worried about any of that. He wanted to take control of that courtroom, and he thought he did, but the jurors picked up on that. Alex Perkins, you're saying cover Morphe. You think he skinned her after he killed her? I haven't heard that. What makes you think that? Same kind of thing. She told him a couple days before she was found or turned up missing that she sent a message saying, "We just need to end this and settle it amicably." Food is love. You're saying only 3 people had that drug, the BAM drug, and he was one of those 3. I also heard he was the only one in Colorado that had that, so I'm not sure which is the case. Yeah, Cheryl Gazer. Yeah, I've seen too many cases where children wake up with a mom and dad. They go to sleep as an orphan. One is dead, the other in jail. Yeah, that's seems to be more and more common these days. John Smith, will they bring Charlie down from South Dakota knowing he probably won't testify? Well, they want him there in case the mom tries to change the story and blame him for something. And keep in mind, Charlie said that the only person he told about the so called extortion attempt after Dan Markel's murder was his mom. And so none of the family knew about it. So in case she denies that she knew about that, they want to have Charlie there. And any other things that are brought up that he tries to backtrack off of, or that Donna tries to discredit that comes out at the case. They just need to have him there as a rebuttal witness. So he may not be called, but and if he's ordered to testify and he doesn't, then at least they tried. Okay, Alex Perkins, thanks for sharing that. You're saying he was famous for skinning animals quickly. That's what he prided himself on, a squirrel in a minute. I'd not heard that before. Eric Lindemeyer, Katie's testimony that they delivered the money is a direct testimony that puts Donna in the middle of the murder. There's not much other direct testimony like that. It is very damning, and that Donna waited to go up to Tallahassee after finding out when he was with the boys there and their dad had been murdered, and they leave late at night and they're waiting until Charlie gets home and they got to do a money exchange. So yeah, like she had to drop off money and the money was wet. As if they had laundered it and cleaned it up to remove their prints. Effie Bebley, Corey Richens, 3 boys are not even teens yet, but she's awaiting trial for killing their dad. Can you imagine that parents can do that to their own kids? It's just unbelievable. Beat your bum. You're saying he brought the drugs from Indiana to Colorado when he moved. Yeah, because him and his wife were originally born and raised in Indiana. Carrie, you're saying is reporting he was the only independent person that bought BAM. BAM is the acronym for the tranquilizer. I don't remember the technical descriptions other than those 3 letters B and A and M. Okay, Food is Life, you're saying he's the only one in Colorado. Yeah, that's what I'd heard. And only 3 people in the entire U.S. Wow, I didn't realize it was that hard to get access to. I mean, there's a lot of big game hunters in Colorado and elsewhere, and I have distant cousins that do that as well. I'll have to ask about the tranquilizer stuff. I have normally it's like game wardens have that kind of stuff. So Tedrick Walker, you're saying he was a hunter and she was paralyzed from a tranquilizer. She was fully aware of what was happening but couldn't move. Barry was the only one to have a prescription for BAM in the state. Yeah, I do think there's gonna be more evidence about Donna's involvement in this murder case because of the search that they did on her and Harvey's condo, plus this latest stuff about phone conversations and trying to take out witnesses. Really stupid stuff. Really stupid stuff if they really did that. Okay, Alex Perkins, you're describing BAM there. Yeah, and so if he was planning on the fact that the body would not be found, and so if the body's not found, they'll never know BAM had anything to do with it. So the body was like 50 miles from the house. So I've not heard yet how they found the body. I've not covered the case that much detail. Appears like Frida, you're asking if Donna could plead out and give more info about Wendy. I think she's too old. I don't know that the prosecution would agree to give her like a couple year sentence. I mean, a couple year sentence could be a death sentence for Donna, but I just think she's just so strong headed and she just believes she's not going to be found guilty. So she's going to double down and fight it all the way, even if she thinks the Tallahassee jurors are biased and ignorant and stupid, like Charlie was talking about in his rants after his conviction. Yes, Kiki, Wendy will be subpoenaed and will testify again, yet again. And they're a lot more aggressive with her the last time. What I was frustrated about was that previous times that Don had testified, Wendy had testified, they weren't aggressive with her and they weren't asking enough details of things that could incriminate not only her but also the other folks on trial. So this last go around, definitely you saw more aggression by Georgia in crossing. Actually, she was sort of like a more like a hostile witness, but she was called the state's evidence. So, but in any event, it's sort of weird because the prosecutor's calling somebody, most of what they're saying is a lie. So normally a prosecutor calls somebody you think is telling the truth, but here there's that unique twist. She never had her declared a hostile witness by the judge because she actually did answer questions, but none of the questions you could find were credible and straight answers. Hardly any of them, I would say. Debbie Blair, what's this about? KR just got some 20 more charges. I don't know what you're talking about there. Did they try to indict her again for stuff they tried earlier that a grand jury wouldn't indict her for? Anybody have any insights on that? You threw a big loaded comment like that. Please give some. Yeah, yeah, I'm not. That's not accurate from what I'm seeing here in the news. So don't know where you're coming at that comment. Beachfront has done a show, or think has she been told she's going home? We don't know what these new attorneys are saying, but Charlie's attorney at the time, Daniel Roshbaum, told him that if he scores a 70 or above, he's going home. And then after he testified, he said he scored a 95. So he was all packed. He gave all of his stuff away in the jail. He's ready to go home when the jury's deliberating. Yeah, you heard about that score? Yeah, it was really bizarre. I never heard an attorney talk about a client like that, like all the numbers, percentages, game, and how you testify. Oh, you're saying it's Corey Richens, okay, not Karen Reed. Let me look that up here. All right, so here. Okay, yeah. All right. Let's look at that here. I'll pull this up. All right, so Corey Richards is in Park City, Utah. Will go to trial next year for the murder of her husband. Now face over 24 new charges, include mortgage fraud, forgery, and money laundering. 5 charges of mortgage fraud, 5 of money laundering, 5 forgery, issuing a bad check, 7. That's sort of ticky tacky. I don't know why they'd add that. Communications fraud, 1, and pattern of unlawful activity, 1. According to the charging documents, Richards used her power of attorney to take out a $250K home equity line of credit on their premarital home of her husband, Eric, without him knowing. She allegedly formed her own LLC, the K. Richards Realty, and used the money from her line of credit to fund the business. When Eric learned that there was a secret line of credit in October 2020, the charges claimed Corey replied that she would repay the loan. Despite Eric believing the line of credit had been paid off, it had not been when he was found dead in March 2022. And then 5 months prior to Eric Richards' death, Corey Richards Realty realized 170 in revenue while its monthly debt service exceeded 250K. It borrowed from over 25 lenders to support itself and service its debt obligations. Despite Corey Richards Realty's existing debt and insufficient revenue, the defendant continued to use hard money loans to purchase 3 additional properties in November 2021. She's also accused of contracting to purchase an unfinished mansion in December 2021. We've probably, if you're familiar with the case, you've seen that big house that they were working on or finishing it out. It was never finished. She lacked the financial ability to service an additional debt, refinance debt, or rehab the property, or otherwise dispose of the property. The property, she was scheduled to close on the mansion the day after her husband died, only to delay the closing to the following day. On the day of Eric Richards' death, Corey Richards Realty owed hard money lenders at least $1.8 million, and the day after his death, it was owed nearly $5 million. So it sounds like a lot like this issue with Murdo, where Murdo was about to be exposed for doing a bunch of fraud. And that's why he went on this killing rampage to try to distract things from focusing on him and his financial dealings. So defense is saying this sudden push to file new fraud charges over 2 years later underscores a weakness of the state's pending charges, since these fraud charges would not even come into play unless they fail to secure a conviction. Timing is also extremely troubling in the light of the fact that the parties are trying to seat an impartial jury in Summit County. Well, I think it's something that they need to bring out. If it's tied to the motive for the murder, then they should bring it out. No, I don't think Charlie will roll on Wendy. I think only after he's convicted. If she's not prosecuted yet, then there's a chance he might. I'm sorry, after his appeals are exhausted, but that's going to be years down the road from now. I can't believe that they would wait to charge Wendy if and only if Charlie flips on her. Okay, you're saying I read an article where Wendy's attorney said the state wouldn't subpoena Wendy over and over if she was guilty. that they prove her innocence. Is that true? Well, no, that's not true. The prosecution knows that Wendy comes across so incredibly terrible on the witness stand. She was the biggest benefactor of the murder, and they like having her up there to testify. And she doesn't do a good job testifying. And every time she testifies, somebody gets convicted. That was part of that conspiracy. So it's just PR spin by the defense attorney. So I wouldn't pay any attention to it. Yeah, Danielle. She only has Wendy Adelson only has immunity for what she's testifying about. But if she lies, then she loses immunity. So I've been saying that she's lost her immunity based on her not telling the truth in each and every trial she's testified at. So that's what I've said. They should bring the same charges that her brother faced, as well as add the perjury. Yeah, if you're saying Charlie should flip on Wendy since Wendy basically did it within 15 minutes of her police interview. Yeah, y'all need to look at the Wendy Adelson interview. Some may call it interrogation, but it wasn't interrogation. It was only an interview. That is true, Alex. The crowning weirdness of Corey Richards was writing a children's book on grief for her three kids and doing a press circuit. Yeah, she's the one seeking media attention for it. Yeah, she's accused of murdering their kid's dad. So wow, that is just so viciously cruel. Food is love. Yes, Wendy's changed her story about going down the road to the crime scene 3 times. Yeah, she keeps backing further up. It's like a ways down on Trescott, and she missed it coming up to the house the first time, and then she starts backtracking. And now the latest is that she never really turned on Trescott at all, because it was blocked off. But it wasn't blocked off except for down by Dan's house. So she drove several blocks distance, but wants to try to make it look like she didn't even see the house. She was so far back. But no, she was definitely close enough to see the house and what was going on there. Frida, I know you don't give out defensive advice. Thoughts on how Donna's attorneys will do during cross? During cross of who? I guess are you talking about on Wendy? Charlie's attorney, Rashbaum, it's like he was representing Wendy. It was so scripted and rehearsed. It came across really, really bad. So they'll probably do the same thing this time around. Wendy will know all the answers in advance that her mom's attorneys want to ask. Okay, Money 911. Are we believing the inmates who told Donna that Katie M lied? Yeah, that's not gonna hold up. There was also indications that they were looking to buy testimony, paying money for that kind of stuff. So All right, so it's almost midnight here, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off, folks. But so that's a plan of action here. We plan on covering the Donna Adelson case on a daily basis, and I also want to cover the Kohlberger case. So there'll be a bunch of overlap. The Kohlberger case should go at least 3 months. So assuming that's not continued as well, that starts the 18th of August. Donna's the 19th. So more to follow, but y'all have a great week, and I'll talk to y'all later. Thanks. Have a good one.